We've got 123 volts in that phase and 123 volts in that phase. Yet at the meter, we've got 0. Alright, so check it out. I got this call. This house down there has no power. So I went to the meter, no power, both phases. We just went up in the air at this pole here. We checked voltage, 240 volts. A secondary line, 2 more poles. Somewhere between here and here, we didn't only lose one phase, but both phases. So, what do you think's going on? It's a fairly new line. Let's check it out.
So this footage is actually super old, guys, hence that I still had braces on. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory to this call. So probably about 2 years prior to me filming this particular content, there was a power theft. I arrived and there was a rain jacket hanging over top of the meter socket conveniently. So we moved the rain jacket, the meter was stolen off the house, and the socket was jumpered out. So the customer was stealing power. Once we discovered that, we went up to the service pole and disconnected the 2 hots. Peeled them back quite a ways so that visually driving by you could see that the power was still disconnected. It was actually when I was first getting my job as a troubleman, so there was a bit of a transition between myself running the area and the previous guy that had retired. So once I was in the area full time, probably, I don't know, a few months later, I drove by and noticed that the home was hooked back up again, and also that there was a new owner living there. So anyone local that recognizes this house has nothing to do with the current owner. This was quite a while back, and the guy that was involved in stealing the power was long gone by the time this video was filmed. Put a new meter on the account with the new homeowner. She had good voltage until a couple years later when I got this call. After a whole lot of confusion, come to find out the previous homeowner had went to pretty extreme lengths to continue stealing power. So let's get back to the clips here.
Alright, so we're at the house. Blank screen there. We already popped the meter off. We got 0 volts on both phases. So we went up the service pole. We've got 240 up there. Last place we're going to check the mast. Alright. So we got 0 volts at the mast. We had 240 at the pole. So somewhere between here and there, we lost voltage. I gotta say, this is a strange call. So we got our 240 volts there. We checked out the wire all the way to the house, at which point we lose all voltage. As you can see, this wire is in pretty good shape. I did find one little thing though. Right here. You can see there the wire looks a little funny. Now it's not broken or nothing. It doesn't look like burn marks. Let's see what's going on, but if I didn't just check voltage there and find none and find 240 there, I'd never believe it, but it almost seems like we're losing our voltage right there in that wire. So before I go disturbing that, if I start moving it around, she might short out against that neutral, get a big ball of fire in my face. So I'm gonna go, I can either cut the blacks at the pole or open that transformer. Alright, so we got the power out now, and you can see that mark I seen on the triplex. You see those little teeth marks right there? Someone used a piercing connector to bite into the triplex here. That would have been to steal power. Now, it feels like the wire is still straight through in there, but it's possible that, well, I don't know what's going on. Let's skin that insulation off, take a look at things. So I got the wire skinned off. I don't know if you can see that tiny little bite mark in the aluminum right there. That's where the pierce connector actually cut through the insulation, made contact with the wire. That would have been to steal power out of the wire before it gets to the meter. But that still doesn't explain why we had 240 volts there and 0 here.
So just to better explain what's going on, what it looks like is once we remove the jumpers in the meter and put a hard cover up on and a meter locking seal, the customer probably figured it was like a normal disconnect where there's still power going through the service lines, but there wasn't because we cut the 2 hots at the service pole. So what I'm assuming happened was that he ran some jumpers up and some piercing connectors to bite into the wire to try to attempt to steal power for a second time, and there was no juice there. So what he did next, it actually blew my mind, especially the fact that what he did held up for as long as it did after he was long gone.
Alright, so we found our problem. So it turns out this customer was stealing power, and they were previously caught, and the crimpet connections were actually cut at this pole. Must have been because they were caught stealing from the loop before, so the lineman who responded would have cut the connections clear. And the customer actually came back and reconnected themselves by somehow taping the wire into the crimpet. You can see there that here, darken a bit. That's just taped on there, so I'm assuming the other one's the same thing. There's not a lineman in the world that would tape that connector back together like that. Let's take a closer look. So we got our loop completely cut clear right now. So we remove that crimpet cover. Yes, sir. So the only thing keeping that house going was that customer had those 2 leads taped very tightly together. That was what was feeding that house. Let's check out that other one. I bet you we got the same thing. See a lot of stuff, but I've never seen someone stealing power this way before. Get that tape off here. Let's set the camera down here. Yes, sir. Wow. Unbelievable. Yes, sir. Stealing power at the meter, so then they stole power at halfway down the wire, got them cut off, and then they hooked themselves back with electrical tape. Nice way to get yourselves hurt. An awful high pole to put a ladder up on. I would say they got a friend with a bucket truck or something to be able to get up here.
So the only reason I didn't remove those crimpet covers first is because power was completely out. I had 0 volts on both sides. It's not uncommon to get a bad crimp connection on one side or the other, or even get maybe 70, 80 volts, but to get 0 on both sides, typically there's a complete loss of supply. It was quite a coincidence that both those connections that the fella taped together failed on the exact same day. But the way he taped those 2 wires together, that lasted for almost 2 years with the new tenant or homeowner. Pretty wild stuff. That was the one and only trouble call I've ever had like that. That was a result of an attempt to steal power from a few years ago. Just a reminder again, guys, do not tamper in any way, shape, or preform with electricity, not even tamper. Don't try to wire up your own stuff if you're not properly certified, authorized, and trained to do so. It can definitely lead to serious injury. And when tampering does involve theft of power, there are, of course, legal repercussions for doing so. So thanks for stopping in, guys, and we'll see y'all soon.